When we talk about the media is still very biased.
I never seen them being bashed on social media.
So there is no one way that the police are viewed in the media.
And mainstream media in particular has what I call a frame that focuses on police being the good guys.
The news media, you have politicians, you have public leaders who tend to venerate and celebrate the police.
For instance, we see the case of Darren Wilson or the issues that we see here. I think that there's always a kind of desire to make police out to be inherently good. And the media does a great job of continuing with that narrative, even when there's some obvious issues, like the Chicago tampering with dash cam issue.
A great example comes to mind, the movie Training Day, Denzel Washington's character. Right, we see a depiction of a pretty brutal cop that is romanticized but not forgiven.
I mean, there's many forms of police brutality, so we think about the stuff that we actually see.
When we talk about police brutality, it's a broad category. We're often talking about a variety of different phenomena that don't always fall neatly into this category of brutality. And typically when you're in conversation with people, we're not always on the same page with what we mean by brutality. So I think it's important to be specific and be clear, but also be broad.
Folks like Daniel Holtzclaw, who use their position to actually abuse and harm the people that they're supposed to be serving and protecting.
The ideas of police brutality are brought before the public. I think most people in America conjure an image perhaps from Rodney King, the beating of Rodney King in California in 1991.
There's the hyper-policing. I would say that that's a form of police brutality when you have certain communities that just have a higher police presence, a more violent police presence. Folks who are just more likely to be arrested just by the sake of being brown and black outside in public. That's a form of police brutality that's called intimidation.
There's consequences to saying things that are not complimentary to the police.
Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, we saw a ring of police detectives in Chicago under Commander John Burge that would coerce confessions in dishonest ways, using explicit lies, sometimes through physical violence, including severe acts of outrageous torture like electric shock, mock execution, suffocating people with plastic bags.
I think people don't talk for a lot of reasons, but they don't get together and say, hey, we got an allegiance to each other, let's don't talk.
And so when we see like Laquan McDonald, that's a systemic issue, right? So we see 12 or 16 police officers, whatever it was, that come to the scene for one individual because he happens to be of a certain background. When we talk about forms of police brutality, we can't just consider the ones that end in someone being harmed physically or arrested. We should also consider the ones that lead up to those events. Had it been another environment, another community, another race of individual, that might not have gone the way it did.
Police departments, well, yes, they have a larger number of black people on the force, but they're being relegated to less important positions, or they're being denied promotion for racist reasons and things of that nature.
We have been fighting for civil rights forever. Like, that's what Nat Turner's revolt was. It was a fight for civil rights. During the Reconstruction era, we had hundreds of young black politicians who were getting actual appointments in the South for the first time ever. Chain gangs had a resurgence because it was like this ability to hold on to this kind of visual of black people on the side of the road or the side of the freeway. Chief Arpaio actually was a proponent of chain gangs, saying that, these folks, in particular black women, need to be treated just like the men. So we need to just put them in chains and, parade them out on the side of the road.
Classic phase of the civil rights movement accomplished two central feats by dismantling the system of Jim Crow that existed in the South, and also by achieving the Voting Rights Act and dismantling the formal system of voter disenfranchisement. People in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s calling attention to economic injustice and proposing really radical solutions to it. Years of his life, Martin Luther King started to more explicitly speak about socialism and talk about a radical redistribution of wealth in the country and a radical transformation of our economic systems.
70s and 80s, we had the Black Panther Party, we had black liberation, we had black nationalism. And we're seeing the exact same thing now. A lot of these movements that we're seeing now are Black queer movements. They're young, Black, predominantly women-led movements.
While we have made great strides in racial progress over the last half century, there's still a severe problem of racism.
It's a long arc of history, of folks who are challenging and threatening a status quo that desires them to not exist.
And the Voting Rights Act did not solve the problem of voter disenfranchisement once and for all, by any means.
The sad fact is, on a good day, 30% of the population votes.
Celebrating both of those achievements, there has to be that asterisk, that caveat that the Civil Rights Act, of course, did not end racial discrimination in the United States. Black police officers also partake in police brutality, right? Just like white police officers. Hiring Black police officers was not enough to end police violence for all kinds of reasons. And
in 1995, chain gangs actually came back.
The most important issue that was not adequately addressed during the civil rights movement was economic inequality. Has some value because you want to give credit to the movement that has moved our country in a better direction through very difficult and violent struggle for a long time.
Well, Black Lives Matter in particular, I think that is controlled from forces way above street level.
So the Black Youth Project, so there's blackyouthproject.com, which is kind of the original organization that started in 2009. Black Youth Project 100 in particular has been organizing against Dante Servin for the last 3 years or something.
So the Black Lives Matter movement is interested in certain moments of reform, and there is no just one movement. I mean, it's just, the movement does not speak in one voice.
Set up to be a research institution, to be a kind of news organization, to be a place to communicate about issues affecting Black communities, specifically in Chicago, and also for teachers' resources and other Chicago resources to address concerns of Black youth.
It's also has been incorporated into other movements that aren't just simply about Black lives, but also about transgender lives, queer lives, other non-white people's lives that matter, that have traditionally not seemed to matter in our society.
And it has a very large kind of research wing. There's what we call it goes by knowledge, voice, and action. So knowledge would be the research part. Voice is the part that I'm the managing editor of, which is the articles, issues, trying to bring to the fore conversations about what's happening in Chicago in particular, but also around the country and around the globe.
Sometimes maybe certain Black lives have mattered, but overall, I think it's a really great, short, very 21st century media-friendly slogan.
So around the country and around the globe that pertain to young Black people. And then there's the action, and that's Black Youth Project 100, which is actually a sister organization of blackyouthproject.com. Black Youth Project 100 came together as a convening of 100 activists, and they were able to kind of put together this organization that was specifically about engaging institutions and other actors in preserving Black futures.
By challenging this fundamental cultural component, this fundamental historical component, that Black lives just have not mattered in U.S. history, change a culture that says that it's okay to kill Black people, right? And that's at the heart of the slogan, Black Lives Matter.